beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. A plan for peace. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy suggests for the first time that a ceasefire might be possible in return for NATO membership.
Everything is this war for independence of the people, not of the land, of the people.
Also tonight, an historic moment in Westminster as MPs vote to back assisted dying, paving the way for a change in the law.
I can die in peace now. And it's made me believe that.
Pressure on the Prime Minister after his Transport Secretary is forced to resign over a criminal conviction. Polls close in the Irish general election, but it could be a long wait for the final results. We'll bring you the exit poll as it happens. This to this. Inside the newly renovated Notre Dame, restored after the devastating fire of 2019. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Ukraine's president has, for the first time, suggested that he's prepared to give up parts of Ukraine to Russia, at least temporarily. In an interview with Sky News, Volodymyr Zelenskyy said such a concession could form part of a ceasefire deal under which his country would join NATO in exchange. President Zelenskyy also discussed the US President-elect Donald Trump, saying he was prepared to work with him and share ideas. He sat down with Sky's chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey.
Mr. President, very nice to meet you. Stuart Ramsey from Sky News.
Hi.
How are you?
Volodymyr Zelenskyy is a man under pressure. We met at the presidential palace in Kyiv after another night of drone attacks and air raid sirens. The Ukraine forces are losing territory in the east of the country. They're running out of soldiers and they don't have enough weapons. For the first time, he has said if offered NATO membership, the fighting will stop and Russia will hold the territory they currently possessed until diplomacy gets it back.
Ніхто не пропонував нам бути в НАТО.
No one has offered us to be in NATO with just one part or another part of Ukraine.
Закінчити гарячу стадію.
That's for once.
Факт.
The fact is that it is a solution to stop the hot stage of the war, because we can just give the NATO membership to the part of Ukraine that is under our control.
Факт. Можна було б, ніхто не пропонував.
Yes, it could be possible, but no one offered.
Треба робити.
But the invitation must be given to Ukraine within its internationally recognized border.
Ви не можете давати тільки частині.
You can't give invitation to just one part of a country. Why? Because thus you would recognize that Ukraine is only that territory of Ukraine and the other one is Russia.
Тому я і сказав, юридично
So
ми не
legally,
маємо
by
права
law, we
визнавати
have no right to
окуповані
recognize the occupied territory as territory of Russia.
In a wide-ranging interview, he said the survival of his people was more important than the land.
I'm afraid to lose our people because the people are the most important, because everything is this war for independence of the people, not of the land, of the people, because people, it's really a nation. A nation has land and etc. and etc. The land is very important. It's a part of your, this of identity. But the people are the most important.
In the interview, he acknowledged that the future President Trump was key to everything and could decide Ukraine's fate.
We have to work with the new president and we have to work with America, first of all, with the United States, the biggest donator, the biggest supporter. Yeah, so for us it's very important. Of course, for us it's very important bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats. We don't want to lose Democrats or Republicans. We have a lot of voices from both parties which are on our side, and I'm thankful to them very much. And of course, we will work with Trump. I want to work with him directly because there are different voices from people around him, and that's why we need not to give anybody around to destroy our communication.
Have you spoken to him yet?
No, we've spoken with him about, basically, in September when I was in New York, we had conversation. It was very warm, good, constructive, but it was mostly basically not with the very, small details, but with Putin, you can't be, without details. It's important, but it was very good meeting and it was important first step. Now we have to prepare some meetings. I don't know how many we will have, but until we will have the real plan where Ukraine is strong.
President Putin will condemn any NATO invitation to Ukraine. The point is, how many NATO members, if any, would actually offer membership to Ukraine? It is, of course, unknown. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Kyiv.
Well, we're joined now by Stuart in Kyiv and our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett. Stuart, to you first of all, some extraordinary comments by Ukraine's president there in your interview. What does this mean for the war, for Ukraine and for potential NATO membership?
Well, potentially it could mean the end of the war, and the President was going far enough to say that it could happen next year. I would say that they're keen to point out that no offer has been made to Ukraine about being invited to join NATO. They're just outlining a plan that would potentially work and perhaps could bring about peace. And obviously the concession that he's making is that he will accept that Russia will keep that territory for now. He's pointing out that he intends to get it back, but that it will be diplomacy that will, rather than fighting for it, a position in the past he has always said would be the case. And I think what really has come as they've reached this conclusion is that The land simply isn't as important as the people of Ukraine, and that is why they're trying to find peace, because literally they're losing huge numbers of young men. The country's being destroyed. Large numbers of people have left. So if he wants to keep Ukraine, then he's going to have to make these type of concessions, hoping that he can be part of NATO and all the security that that brings with it.
OK, Stuart, let's cross to Ivor in Moscow now. And Ivor, what President Zelenskyy had to say, potentially a deal, is this something that President Putin could be happy with?
Yeah, I think Vladimir Putin will be a very happy man tonight following this interview, because for months he's been locked in a standoff with Volodymyr Zelenskyy over how this war might end. Putin has always insisted that Russia gets to keep the territory it occupies and more, while Zelenskyy has always demanded that Moscow hands it back. But for the first time tonight, one of them has shown a willingness to give ground, potentially, and it's not Vladimir Putin. So for him, this will be a very important psychological victory, because it's his opponent who has blinked first. What's more, it gives him something to sell to the Russian people. It follows days of threats and warnings from the Kremlin, and the message will be that Ukraine and its Western allies have backed down in the face of Russian superiority. But this isn't to say that there will suddenly be a ceasefire, because their positions on NATO membership are still incompatible. Russia insists that Ukraine must abandon that idea completely if there's to be a peace deal. But the question now is that since Kyiv has made the first move here and showed a willingness to compromise, could Russia soften its position too and follow suit? And what's been fascinating on that issue has been Vladimir Putin's language of late when talking about Donald Trump. Yesterday, he described the president-elect as intelligent, experienced. He said he would find the solution to the Ukraine war. Now, to me, that sounds like the tone of someone who wants to get in Donald Trump's good books. So it seems like both sides know that peace talks are inevitable, but they seem to be approaching them from different angles, one from a position of weakness, the other from a position of strength.
Ivor, thank you. And Stuart, thank you both. To some breaking news now, and the polls have closed in Ireland's general election. The incumbent Taoiseach is fighting for his political reign under pressure from the Nationalist Party, Sinn Féin, led by Mary Lou McDonald. The results of the exit poll shows that Sinn Féin and Fine Gael are almost level, with Fianna Fáil just behind. Let's go straight to our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins in Dublin and Stephen Murphy, our Ireland correspondent in Greystones on the East Coast. David, to you first of all, your response to those exit polls.
Yes, astonishing figures, quite frankly. Sinn Féin on 21.1% at the top of the pile. Fine Gael, led by Simon Harris, the current Taoiseach, just behind on 21%. And Fianna Fáil, the party led by Ireland's current Foreign Minister, Micheál Martin, on 19.5%. What this means is that for the second consecutive general election, there is less than 2 percentage points dividing the three largest parties in Ireland. And it's going to be difficult enough for them to form the next coalition government. Remember that it's not about who wins the popular vote here, it's about who is best positioned to form the next government. Ireland has been governed by coalitions since the 1980s. Now, this was an Ipsos exit poll conducted of 5,000 people in 250 polling stations. It was incredibly accurate last time around, and if it's accurate again this time, it's been an incredibly good day for the Sinn Féin leader, Mary Lou McDonald. The party had been virtually written off at the beginning of the election campaign because it had plummeted in the polls. It's also been quite a good day for Simon Harris, who hasn't had the best campaign, the current Taoiseach. But right now, on the basis of these figures, I think it is fair to speculate that we are likely to see a return of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil to coalition government in Ireland. But if Sinn Féin has won the popular vote again, it's becoming increasingly difficult for those two big parties on the centre-right to ignore just how many people are voting for Sinn Féin now.
OK, Stephen, to you next. It will be a while before we get any results, but can you give us a sense of the feeling there tonight?
Well, we're here in the Beach House pub in the seaside town of Greystones in County Wicklow. So this is Simon Harris territory. This is the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister's hometown. We've been here for most of the day. We were there when he cast his vote here with the family earlier on. I've been speaking to people emerging from that polling station, and they're not by all means voting for Simon Harris and his Fine Gael party here. People here just beginning to digest the results of the opinion poll, which is on in this little cosy corner of the pub. And we're just going to interrupt a couple of people here. Carmel and Joe, thank you very much for speaking to us on Sky Sky News. It looks as though Ireland has pretty much gone the same way again 4 years on. Why do you think people are voting again instead of voting for change when we hear so much about the problems that this country has, the housing crisis and so on? Why are people apparently, at very early indications, voting for more of the same?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be very, very similar just from the readout there. So I think maybe people are looking at financial stability for the kids growing up. And, you know, OK, I know people are not super happy with what has been happening, but at least the country has been very stable for the last number of years. So I think that's why people have voted for more of the same, it looks like, yes.
Karma, what are the issues as far as you're concerned? I mean, would you be happy to see sort of more of the same, or would you be of the feeling it was time for a change?
I think stability, like Joe was saying, stability is really important. I suppose after the austerity we had, 10 years ago, it's really important to have stability.
So there was a reluctance to hand over to Sinn Féin at this particular time, you think? You think it was too much of a gamble?
Perhaps, yeah, but with the exit poll, there's no saying that it can't be Sinn Féin in power, depending on who will negotiate with them.
It's early days, I know, but listen, thanks very much, and sorry for interrupting your pints. But look, in the Irish system, it's a complicated electoral system. Counting is going to go on for a number of days, and it doesn't begin until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
OK, Stephen and David, thank you both. Following a heartfelt and at times emotional debate, MPs have voted in favour of the bill, which means adults who are terminally ill can be assisted to end their own lives. An historic and momentous day, which will bring relief for many, but also concern for those who are worried about the consequences of the decision. Well, today was the second reading of the bill, which means it will go back to MPs for a final reading when the legislation has been drawn up. This is how MPs voted: 330 in favour, 275 against. That's a majority of 55. Well, in a moment, we'll get the reaction from people who will be directly impacted by the legislation. Plus, we'll look into the detail of the bill. But first, our political editor, Beth Rigby, has the story from Westminster.
Order!
Order. A vote that matters for every single one of us, and MPs know the weight of it.
The ayes to the right, 330. The noes to the left, 275.
Gasps as the Commons finally vote to give you the choice over how you die. The path now set for one of the most profound social changes in decades. MP Kim Leadbeater led this charge, emotional in victory.
Well, I'm nearly in floods of tears because it's been a really emotional process. But I'm incredibly proud that I think today we've seen Parliament at its best. We had some brilliant speeches from people with different views and different opinions across all sides of the House. But I think we've done what needed to be done.
But deep disappointment from those opposed.
I think that is a very dangerous thing to introduce into family life, and particularly for the most vulnerable people. I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to improve the bill to remove that biggest concern that I have.
Assist us to live, not to die.
A Commons debate, but a national conversation. Campaigners had gathered in the morning in Parliament Square to bear witness. Yeah. MPs put party politics aside to have perhaps the hardest conversation of all. How should our loved ones die? Kim Leadbeater opening 5 hours of emotional debate ahead of the vote.
This bill is not about people who are choosing between life and death. It is about giving dying people who have got 6 months or less to live autonomy about how they die and the choice to shorten their death.
Danny Kruger leading the opposition, worried about where this bill might take us.
This new reality, the option of assisted suicide, the obligation to have the conversation around the bedside, in whispers in the corridor, is it time? And it will change life and death for everyone.
This is a debate where profound disagreement was expressed with profound respect. MPs divided in opinion, but united in sympathy for the difficult stories shared. Mary Foy speaking of her own child.
Since her birth, we were told many times that she might have only 6 months to live. She lived for 27 years. Crucially, Maria was non-verbal. And I am filled with dread and fear for those other people like Maria who are non-verbal and don't have that capacity.
Kit Malthouse sharing the devastating story of Mark, who was suffering from lung disease, in the hope it might persuade colleagues to back the bill.
Mark Crampton was a former police chief inspector. His COPD became too much for him, and so he informed his family that he was going to take his own life. He took his oxygen tank and mask, and late one night went out and sat on a railway embankment. He wanted a death that was instant and quick, that he could rely upon, and he took his life in lonely circumstances in the middle of the night.
Mark's story, one of dozens recounted in the Commons on a day where Parliament showed the public its very best side. These were hard stories for MPs to tell. And for me, and I'm sure for you too, they were hard stories to hear, but all of it was handled with humanity, consideration and care. And the result is truly historic. After decades of debate, the right to choose how you end your life could be finally heading into law. This, then, a momentous day and just the start of a bigger discussion about how in this country we approach death. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, as you saw in Beth's piece, there have been protests in Westminster today for and against the bill. Sky's health correspondent Ashish Joshi has been with the people today who are perhaps directly impacted by the decision, people who have terminal cancer. Here's his report.
And that means today is a truly historic day where the principle of being able to end your own life if you are terminally ill has been passed with assistance.
This is what it means to someone facing the end of their life.
At last.
Relieved and very satisfied with the results because
it means choice. It means dignity. And those are very key words about the whole thing. I mean, something had to change.
Frank has incurable liver disease. And last week, she was diagnosed with cancer. At first, she was given 3 to 6 months to live, but Frank keeps defying the prognosis.
This has wider implications for the rest of society. Somebody might accuse you of being selfish.
I'm being selfish. I'm being selfish because I'm in pain, because I can't go out in high heels anymore. You know, silly things. It's me.
It's the quality of your life.
It is.
Your right to die threatens my right to live.
Okay. But every story has two sides. Nikki knows what a life-changing illness means. At 36, she contracted a rare virus that left her paralyzed. If assisted dying had been offered her then, Nikki says she would have chosen it. But now it's different.
I spent 5 months nearly in intensive care, completely and utterly paralysed. I couldn't speak, I couldn't do anything, and never knew from day to day whether it was the last day. If we do this, it will change everything and will put so many people at risk.
Nikki and Merv travelled across the country to join others opposed to assisted dying.
Assist us to live! Not to die! Assist us to live!
The bill has passed its first major hurdle, but Nikki's fight is not over.
I'm shocked because maybe naively I didn't think we'd lose. But well, that's the description, that's just a word, lose. We can decide now what to do.
Frank lives month by month receiving excellent palliative care at a local hospice. And while she looks forward to another Christmas, she knows her time is running out.
I can die in peace now. And it's made me believe that.
Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Well, MPs grappled with how to vote, with many still undecided at the very last minute. Let's take a look at how politicians voted and what's next. Sky's political correspondent Liz Bates has more.
We've been talking about this for weeks, trying to predict how this vote will go. Well, finally, we know. Here are the numbers. 330 MPs voted in favour, 275 against, 46 MPs didn't vote, 1 MP abstained by voting for and against. That's a majority of 55, bigger than some were predicting, but not overwhelming. So let's see the political breakdown. And you can see a huge chunk of the MPs in support are Labour. The Conservatives split quite differently. You can see a majority of them against. The Liberal Democrats, they were the biggest supporters of this bill. Another big question, how would the Cabinet vote? Well, now we know. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, he voted for, as did the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. 15 of them did in total. Fewer voted against, just 8, but there are still some big names in this group, including the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. Most controversial, though, the Health Secretary and the Justice Secretary both voted against, as we expected to. This could get very difficult for them as this bill progresses, because they would be the ones who would have to implement it. So, what are the main bits of the bill? Well, firstly, who is eligible? Adults aged 18 and over who have mental capacity and are terminally ill and are in the final 6 months of their life. These are some of the key safeguards. 2 doctors must assess each request at least 7 days apart. The eligibility criteria states that a person must have a clear, settled and informed wish to end their own life. And finally, the legal bit, new offences will be created to stop people being coerced at every stage of the process, either the first or second declaration that they want to die, or at the point where they self-administer the approved substance that will end their lives. So what happens next? Well, first of all, committee stage. MPs from all political parties will look at the detail and take evidence. Then report stage, that's when MPs will vote on amendments. And then, finally, third reading, there will be another Commons vote before it goes to the Lords. They will probably put down some amendments as well. And at the end of all that, there will be one final vote before, if the bill passes, it gets royal assent and becomes law. We don't know how long any of this will take, but it will probably happen over the next 6 months to a year. So even though today felt like a huge moment, it's just the first step on what will be a long and unpredictable process.
There is a new Transport Secretary tonight after Louise Haigh was forced to resign when Sky News reported she pled guilty to a fraud offence a decade ago. Downing Street has named Justice Minister Heidi Alexander as her replacement. But the Prime Minister has come under fire, in some cases by his own MPs, for not backing one of his popular cabinet ministers. Sky's political correspondent Rob Powell has the story.
The Transport Secretary no longer. 12 hours after Sky News revealed Louise Haigh was convicted in 2014, she resigned from the Cabinet. In a letter to Sir Keir Starmer, published in the early hours, she said, "I appreciate that whatever the facts of the matter, this issue will inevitably be a distraction from delivering on the work of this government and the policies to which we are both committed." The Prime Minister issued a short response thanking her for her work and saying she still had a huge contribution to make. Friends of Louise Haigh say the incident was fully disclosed when Keir Starmer appointed her. Downing Street has not confirmed if the Prime Minister was aware of the conviction, but sources said the full facts were not previously known.
He needs to start answering these questions, which he would have posed himself in opposition. He's always been on that side of things, and I think the public do get a feeling from Keir Starmer that he's said one thing in the past and is now doing something completely different.
Louise Haigh was convicted here at a now closed London court. She says she was mugged in 2013, mistakenly reported her phone stolen and was advised by solicitors to plead guilty. Others challenge that.
We've spoken to 3 separate sources who dispute Louise Haigh's account and say she made the theft report to benefit personally. As well as standing for Parliament, she was also working at the insurance firm Aviva at the time, but 2 sources say she lost this job as a result of the incident.
From the left of the party, Louise Haigh is popular with trade unions, but her comments about boycotting P&O ferries over mass sackings led to a rebuke from Number 10. Swindon MP Heidi Alexander replaces her as Transport Secretary. With more similar politics to those in charge, some now worry about the makeup of the Cabinet.
We're down to Angela Rayner and Ed Miliband, really, who are seen as kind of on the left or the soft left of the party. The rest, unfortunately, would be seen as on the right of the party. And I think that just means you don't get the pluralism of debate within Cabinet.
A colourful politician in more ways than one, Louise Haigh will be missed by many in Labour. But for those in number 10, political fallout from this resignation may still land at their door. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
There have been violent clashes between protesters and police outside the Parliament building in Georgia's capital, Tbilisi. Police in riot gear ordered people to disperse using a water cannon, tear gas and pepper spray. It's the second night of demonstrations against the government's decision to delay talks to join the EU until 2028, a move seen by many as pro-Russian and anti-Western. A man has been jailed for a minimum of 28 years after being found guilty of murdering his brother-in-law and attempting to kill 3 others on the Isle of Skye and Scottish mainland. Our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis, reports now on a case that has torn apart a remote area and raised questions about gun violence.
Inexplicable violence visited this island 2 years ago. A Highland paradise still hurting, still grieving. And they have every right to feel this way.
People will never forget the events of that day, nor should they. Skye has a population of about 11,000 people. It's a big place. It's actually bigger than London if you look at its landmass.
This was a shooting and stabbing spree carried out by one of their own, Finlay MacDonald. His first victim, his own wife. Here in the home she was seeking help to flee, she survived a frenzied knife attack. Convinced she was having an affair, the innocent eyes of their 4 children witnessed the bloodshed, the tranquility of this landscape punctured by suffering, a 2-year-old crying, cradling her mum's body. The child's father drove off, the car loaded with a shotgun and ammunition. This was a rampage only just beginning, a journey that would be the darkest day in this island's history. A decade-old family feud escalating here at the home of his brother-in-law John McKinnon. Fixated on losing a fight in 2013, Finlay executed him as the sound of blood-curdling screams echoed all around.
A callous coward whose actions have traumatised all those involved. There is no place in society for such a dangerous individual.
And still it was not over. A disconnect between this beauty and this horror on this day. Here, the aftermath of another shooting at another house involving another couple. This time, local osteopath John Mackenzie and his wife Faye. Their attacker wanting payback after becoming fixated. His back injury had been worsened following appointments here at their home.
What began with a frenzied, persistent attack with a knife on your wife continued with you deliberately targeting those you bore long-standing grudges against.
Gun crime and the level of horror this court heard about is rare in the UK. But the jury here in Edinburgh were told about documented concerns around Finlay MacDonald's physical and mental health for years. He'd even made threats to kill. Yet he was able to buy a brand new gun and a stash of ammunition just weeks before this violence. An act of evil on an island scarred, now wanting to be left alone. Conor Gillis, Sky News.
In 2019, the world watched in disbelief as a fire ripped through Notre Dame, devastating the Parisian landmark. Today, in sharp contrast, viewers have been treated to a televised walkthrough of the newly renovated cathedral in all its splendour. Our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, reports.
Rescued, renovated, revitalised and returned to its people. Notre Dame Cathedral is the jewel of French architecture and it's alive once more. Inside, the soaring ceilings have been painstakingly rebuilt. It is 5 years since Notre Dame went up in flames, when bewildered Parisians gathered to watch, singing to calm their sense of shock.
Oh my God!
The president came to lead these celebrations. He said the fire had caused a national wound.
It's for us all very emotional to be here together in our cathedral a few days before the 7th and 8th of December, and to do this at the exact spot where 5 years ago the nave was in ruins.
Notre Dame was dubbed the building site of the century. 700 million euros were donated towards its restoration. And those who worked on it felt an affinity, using traditional skills on an epic scale.
It feels like it was built yesterday, like it's just been born, even though Notre Dame is very old. And because it's been so carefully restored and cleaned, it looks really extraordinary.
We're happy to have achieved this feat, but we're also sad to be leaving this monument. We know it's the end, and that's it. We're turning over a new leaf.
But while the inside is done, the outside still needs work. There will be scaffolding clinging to Notre Dame for years to come. This is not being rushed, but it is being celebrated. France felt it had lost a part of its soul when this mighty building burned. Now, magnificently, it is returning to life. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the political commentator Benedict Spence. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Telegraph about tonight's exclusive top story here on Sky News. The headline, Zelenskyy, I'll give up territory for peace. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.